The threat was already hiding in plain sight. Everything they needed to reach you was already public. Then came the breach, the extortion, the deepfakes, the failures. You're listening to The Lockdown, where we turn reconnaissance into the first line of defense. Here's your host, Ray Heffer.
Well, isn't this a surprise? We are back with Season 2 of The Lockdown. I bet you thought it was over forever. And I thought it was as well. I'll be honest, last year when I was trying to do an episode a week, I was finding it really difficult, especially trying to hold down a very busy day job as a field CISO. But for this season, I think aiming for 1 or 2 episodes a month will scratch that itch for you. It certainly will for me. And we will have a lot to discuss. And previously on The Lockdown, we discussed privacy pretty much in its entirety. There was a bit of security in there, I'll touch on that in a moment, but we were discussing everything from using Graphene OS for mobile privacy to the best web browsers to use, how to configure an always-on VPN, how to wear the tinfoil hat without being ridiculed, and how to tear down cameras from the streets. Well, actually, we didn't do that last part, but the thought did cross my mind. Now, for the security side of things, sure, we did touch on it from time to time, but in this season, I want to make sure we have a really good balance across both privacy and security. And it makes sense. I spend my weeks, my days, talking with chief information security officers, security leaders, and going to cybersecurity conferences. So it just makes sense that I share some of that and bring that back on this show. Now, I do think we have a lot to discuss. I've been hearing rumours that some of you abandoned Graphene OS and have gone back to your iPhone. So you are in a lot of trouble. So we're going to discuss Graphene OS again. I still use Graphene OS, and I also still use LibreWolf. Now, some good friends of mine in the cybersecurity industry, in fact, one particular good fellow, I won't mention his name, who is an OSINT trainer. In fact, I should get him on this podcast. I'll see if he's interested. He is a fan of Brave, and Brave as a privacy browser is absolutely excellent. As you know, last year we had Luke Mulks from Brave Software on the show, and I'm a big fan. But for me, it has too much bloat. I'm not interested in the crypto stuff, is it Leo, the AI features, and there's a whole list of other things it does. I want my browser to be as lean as possible, and certainly not distracting, because the more features you add, I may overlook something which could impact my privacy. That said, Brave Origin, I believe it's called, is a paid browser, and I think it's around $60 or something like that. That's US money. And that is exactly what I would want out of a browser. It's stripped of all that nonsense, and it's a secure, stable browser. And clearly, you're funding the browser. And this makes sense. I know some of you might not want to pay, and there could be some tie to your identity there, but there's ways around that, as I'm sure many of you know. But I think the Brave Origin browser is an excellent option for us as individuals. And also, if you are a chief information security officer, or you are in security leadership in some way, you should seriously consider that for the organization. Now, I'm not implying that we only use one browser. I use both. I actually have Brave and I use LibreWolf. The one thing that's missing from Brave, and I think this is more of an architectural issue with the Chromium browser itself, is the lack of multi-account containers, or those tabs that are fresh that I can use and they don't pick up cookies from other containers. It's kind of like a sandbox in that respect. Because I have multiple email accounts with the same provider, so they open in different tabs. I may have multiple Reddit accounts and that type of thing, so they all get opened in their own tabs. And that's just one of the plugins that I absolutely love, and that's why primarily I'm using LibreWolf day to day. But it isn't one ring to rule them all, is it? Or was it one ring to find them, one ring to bring them all, and in the darkness bind them? I'm not sure what that has to do with web browsers, but the thought just came to my mind. Oh, and by the way, before we end the browser conversation, it's worth noting that Brave Origin is actually free if you're on Linux. I don't know if it's going to stay that way. I assume it will. So if you want to try it out and you're running Ubuntu or something like that, then that's a good way of seeing what it's all about. Now, the line you heard in the opening was that we turn reconnaissance into the first line of defense. But let me just dive into what that actually means. Now, many of you will know that I also have the tagline, minimize what can be known. And this is something I embody in my day-to-day life. I'm not going to get a contract with a company if I don't need to, which is why I use prepaid SIMs. If I'm going to get a contractor to do work on the house, I make sure I can pay in cash and they do not need to know my real name. But as this relates to cybersecurity, almost every attack starts the same way. Before the attacker sends a phishing email or before they call your cell phone provider to do a SIM swap attack, before they actually hack anything, they do research. They're gathering information that's already public. It's already out there in plain sight. Now, in cybersecurity, we call that reconnaissance. And it is the first stage of almost every attack there is. And it's the thing that I see so many people not get wrong, but just overlook entirely. And to be fair, most security teams get this wrong as well. It's not just us as individuals. And that's because they're treating reconnaissance as like the attacker's free move. It's just something they do and they can't stop. But I think that is entirely incorrect. Reconnaissance is the first stage of an attack that runs entirely on information that we put out there as an organization or indeed as individuals. So it means this is the first stage that we are in control. We can stand our ground because this material is ours. Now, my photo is online. It's on my website. It's on my LinkedIn profile. There are numerous videos with me on there. I'm not going to prevent that. But this comes down to thinking like a chief information security officer. A CISO will look at the threat model and they will assess risk. And my tagline is not eliminate what can be known. As much as I would love to hide away in a cabin in the middle of nowhere, I still have a job to do. Now, everything that comes after reconnaissance, so that's the phishing email that lands, or the help desk call that's talking them into a password reset, or perhaps the exposed server that gets hit, all of that is somebody acting on a picture that they built out of what you left in the open. Now, if you take away that picture, or take away as much as you can, the whole thing gets slower and potentially collapses for the attacker. It's more expensive and it's far more likely to fail for them. And this is what I mean by the first line of defense. It really is the only part of an attack where we are protecting our own material instead of reacting to somebody else's move. Now, I've already said this season is about balancing privacy and security. And here is why. On the privacy side, it's the things that we have always covered here. Removing our data from data broker sites, looking at metadata, looking at what phone we use, our browser habits, using a private browser. I've already discussed that. And on the security side, it's the attack surface that any organization is worried about. Reconnaissance does cover both because the attacker or threat actor, whatever you want to call them, really does not care which side of the line the information came from. An executive's mobile phone number or even the phone number of an IT help desk person is going to be gold to them. And there are various ways they can get it. They actually do this as well through fake job postings. Now, you've got to be careful with this type of thing on LinkedIn, for example. You may get a fake LinkedIn account, pretend they're a recruiter. They may contact you with this amazing offer. And before you know it, you've sent your resume with your address. Hopefully you don't have that on there, but many people do. Or even if it's just your phone number on your resume, now they know which phone number you use. And that's if they couldn't find it on the data broker sites. For this podcast from here on, when I'm talking about privacy and when I'm talking about security, I am talking about two sides of the same coin. And I want us to start thinking more like a chief information security officer. All right, so what does a CISO or a chief information security officer actually do? Well, the stereotype is it's some person in a building that just says no to everything. They're making you change your password every 30 days. Now, that's definitely a CISO that existed a long, long time ago in the dark days. That is not the job of a CISO. The real job of a CISO is someone who works out what can go wrong, how likely it is, and what it would cost to the organization if that happened. And then they decide what they can do about it. That's it. They understand the threat landscape and then they manage the risk. But they're also there to enable the business, not say no to everything. So let's break this down. I think first, we need to work out what is it we're actually protecting. Now, in a company, that's certainly going to be customer data, money, systems, reputation. Many organizations think they don't have anything significant to protect, but actually if their invoices are redirected to a threat actor's bank account, or worse still, customer information ends up in a data breach, now they've had a reputation hit at best, and regulatory fines as well that could be worse. Now, in our own life, this is our identity. This is what we want to protect. I want to protect the money in my bank account, access to those accounts, physical safety and security, as well as my own, that of my family as well. Now, we can't protect everything equally, so we have to be considerate and careful about what really matters. As I've said in previous episodes, we do not know how our circumstances could change overnight. As far as I know, a tornado could rip through my house, and then the next thing I know, the news and media asking my neighbours who I am and if I'm okay. I could be on a business trip, but they're saying, oh yeah, and they're just giving my name and address, and that's completely exposed. Or it could be a threat actor from a ransomware gang that wants to use me as leverage to get into the organisation. Now, a teenager wearing a hoodie that's running a scam off their laptop that they got from their mum is a very different threat from an organised ransomware crew that does this for a living. And this is why we need to look at how exposed we really are. What is reachable? What is public? And what are the gaps between the thing that you are protecting and the people that would want it? As I've said, my picture is online. That's a risk I'm willing to take. But when it comes to where we live, our real SIM card phone numbers, for example, who we bank with even, the email address used with our bank account, and a whole stack of other things, this is what we want to protect as individuals, but also as it extends into an organisation. That also needs to be protected as well, because it's how not only ransomware gangs, but people that want to do a data breach, or even nation states might want to attack the organisation, and they're going to target individuals to do that. You and only you can decide what your threat model is. If you do not want your picture anywhere online, then kudos to you. Go for it. It's going to take a while to clean that up, especially if you've have previous employers, for example, that have got you cached on their website from a "This is our team" page, or perhaps social media profiles. You can go to the Wayback Machine and pull up old pictures, but it's not impossible. Now, for any given risk, there are really only 4 choices. We reduce the risk, we accept it, we transfer it to somebody else, usually through insurance or something like that, or we just avoid the risk entirely. Now, a good chief information security officer is making that call every day, and they do this deliberately for each risk. Instead of just reaching for the strongest possible control or mitigation every single time. That wouldn't make sense. And you also have to remember, CISOs have a very broad remit. They're not just looking at malware and viruses, but they're looking at what vulnerabilities exist in the software that they run, what regulatory and governing bodies are requiring audits and they have to provide evidence for. But all of this stuff also costs money, it costs time, it also costs convenience. We could have a system that's 100% secure, but it would be buried under 100 feet of concrete, destroyed, and it would be completely unusable. Sure, no one can hack it, but no one could use it either. So that's going to be a control that I would say is far too painful. And this is why CISOs have something called the CIA triad. Now, that's not the Central Intelligence Agency. This is confidentiality, integrity, and availability. And that's what cybersecurity is about. It is about understanding, managing and mitigating the risk of our critical data, and for many of us as individuals, that's our personal data, from being disclosed, altered, or denied. Okay, so back to thinking like a CISO. The first thing we need to look at is residual risk. After you've done everything sensible, there's always going to be something left over. So for example, you may use a data broker removal service, but there's going to be a residual risk left over from that. Your data is still going to be out there. It's not 100%. You may have to manually request removal. But this applies to everything in cybersecurity. And really the discipline is to look at that leftover risk and either accept it or do something about it. But we certainly don't pretend it's not there. Now, the second thing we need to do is the compensating control. Sometimes you just can't remove an exposure. Perhaps there is that photo of you online that you just cannot get rid of. Google perhaps are being very stubborn, or it could be on some social media site, whatever it is. Now, part of understanding the threat landscape is to stay current with it. Every day it's moving all the time. I wake up every day and there's another ransomware attack. There's another data breach. Now, if your job is in cybersecurity, you want to show up informed. And something I've been running for a few years now is basically my own collection of RSS feeds. I would open my RSS app, so on my Graphene OS device, that's called Feeder, and I'll just have a look every day at what's going on. The problem with that is there was just so much, and it was very difficult, especially in the morning when I had a few minutes over a coffee, just to get an idea of what's happening out there in the cybersecurity world. So what I've done on my website, psysecure.com, that's PSY, secure.com. If you scroll down, there's a link to the daily executive briefing. You can put an email in there, not your real one. I would create a junk email, an alias, whatever it is. I don't do any tracking. It's text only. There's no images. There's nothing like that. But every weekday at 8 o'clock in the morning, Eastern time, you will get an executive security briefing. In fact, you can choose the topics you're interested in, whether it's privacy and security, OSINT, cryptography, cybersecurity, and so on. You can unsubscribe at any time, and I actually use Resend as the platform to do that, but there's no tracking, or certainly nothing that I've intentionally put on there. So sign up with an alias, you'll get that in the weekday, and that's how I start my mornings, because understanding what's going on out there makes me more articulate when I'm in customer meetings, but also gives me a heads up of what threats could be impacting me directly. But when we think like a CISO, we really want to apply this to our own lives. And it's crazy the amount of CISOs I have met that every single day they're looking at threat modeling and they're assessing risk and they're putting controls in place. But they don't do that in their personal lives, which I think is nuts. But also, even with us privacy people, we get this wrong. We may jump on controls without ever doing any thinking behind it. Don't just adopt every tool and technique, taking every extreme measure just because you read about it or it might sound cool. I think you really need to stop and ask, who is this defending against? And what are you actually protecting in this instance? Because I think this goes beyond privacy and security into paranoia. And we could be so paranoid that we're not going to drive anywhere anymore because of all the cameras that are spying on us. We're not going to walk in the neighborhood and walk the dog because doorbells are spying on us. And we're not even going to have a Graphene OS device at all. We might as well just not have a mobile and just go back to an old flip phone. You're going to have a miserable life if you do that. That said, the tools that I use in privacy are invaluable to me. Graphene OS, the browsers, Signal Messenger is my messenger of choice. I still use that. And absolutely getting yourself off of data brokers, self-hosting as much as you can. And I stand by all of that. In fact, I still self-host Nextcloud. I've been doing that since OwnCloud. It must be at least 15 plus years ago. I can't even remember now. And it's something I can't live without. But I think the piece that I didn't really touch on a lot in the previous season was the reasoning behind this. And this is the threat model and the risk profile that comes first. And tools should always come second. So let's give you some examples from my own setup. So I run Graphene OS, but I don't put my phone in a Faraday bag at home. Despite owning a Faraday bag, I actually carry a bunch of them in my bag, in my backpack all the time. But I just want to walk through the reasoning why I'm not putting my device in there on a daily basis. because I think this reasoning is the point. The risk that you're mitigating by putting your phone into a Faraday bag is leaking your location or your activity in a way that ties back to you personally. I've mitigated the risk as best I can by having my phone run a prepaid SIM in an alias name. It was paid for in a way that doesn't connect me to my name. So even if somebody found that number, and I don't use it anywhere, by the way, it's not going to lead back to me. You're not going to be able to go on Telegram and pay some rogue employee from the cell phone provider to tell you, the location. The link between the device and my identity is already severed. I've dealt with that. That said, actually, my phone is always on silent. I do have vibrate turned on. I cannot stand, and this is probably nothing to do with security or privacy, more about my brain here, but I cannot stand notification sounds and alerts and the phone ringing or anything like that. So it stays silent, it's on vibrate, and I just check my messages intentionally. And that's actually the part of this. I don't want to be disturbed by notifications. I decide when I check my device to see what notifications are on there. That said, if someone's trying to call me, the phone will vibrate and I can recognize that pattern so I know it's a phone call. But yeah, this is what minimize what can be known really means. And it's not about vanishing entirely. It doesn't even mean that we need to reach for every extreme privacy measure going. It just means that we're going to reduce what's findable about you intelligently in the places where it genuinely matters for your threat model. And like I've always said on previous shows as well, the tinfoil hat really is optional. And many of you might want to do this for yourself, but for the company you work for as well. And a lot of you I know do work for smaller companies, places perhaps with no security team at all, or where everyone has access to everything and one person is wearing several hats. Well, the good news is that the discipline is exactly the same. We just scale it up. And smaller organizations, I think, are where the payoff is even greater and some of the low-hanging fruit can be implemented quite easily. So, same questions. What is it you are actually protecting? Now, for a small business, that's almost certainly money. You do not want some threat actor sending a fake PDF to all of your customers saying that this is the bank account and it's been updated. Trust me, this happens and I see this very frequently. We want to know who is coming for it. Mostly it's not a nation state hacker. It could be an opportunistic fraudster or a ransomware gang, or even just somebody phoning your one IT person help desk pretending to be a locked out employee, or even a ransomware gang looking for that easy target. So how exposed are you? Look at what your website gives away. What's your job ad say about the systems and your team? What can be found about the people who can approve a payment? And then you can do some very high leverage things. For example, a rule that any change to payment details has to be confirmed through a second channel, a known phone number, perhaps a contact on Signal Messenger, or never reply to the email that asked for it. But some out-of-band communication with a secondary form of verification is so important. But also get data brokers just to drop the people most likely to be impersonated. And in fact, I'm even saying that, I'm thinking that's everybody now. It used to be, and I used to fall into this trap as well, thinking it's the C-level execs that are at the most risk. And then it was IT help desk, and then it's HR. Honestly now, I think everybody is a target in the organization. Now, having the security control in place is not the same thing as being protected. And this is one idea that I want to spend a bit more time on, because this is something I've been developing that I call the control confidence gap. Every security control that you have, whether that be in your personal life or the organization you work for, is resting on the assumption about what an attacker cannot know or cannot fake. So for example, a help desk that resets a password because they assume the person on the other end of the phone can recite the employee's manager, their start date, or the mobile phone number. Or a finance team that approves a payment because they assume that the face and voice on the actual video call really is the chief financial officer. And one of my pet hates is security questions. So this is this account recovery, for example, on your email. And the assumption is that the answers to your security questions are actually private to you. which in most cases they are not. They can be socially engineered, they can be found on social media, and they can basically be found online. Name of your first pet, date of birth, that type of thing. And public information, what's available online, OSINT, the open source intelligence, breaks all of these assumptions, and it really does cause the most devastating harm. Because the help desk is still going to follow a script and the payment is still going to be approved. People are just trying to do their job at the end of the day. Now, if you are in cybersecurity, you're a security leader, perhaps a CISO, well, your audit still passes. You've done everything that NIST said. You have multi-factor authentication and you've taken all these security controls seriously. But this is what I'm talking about with the confidence control gap. And this is that gap between having a control but actually being protected by it. They are two very different things. Now, you can have multi-factor authentication everywhere, and that security control that you've checked off and has passed the audit may not be as strong as you think it is, because what good is a control when your phone number is available online and a threat actor can either pay that employee, the rogue employee, on Telegram, or just print some fake ID with your picture on it, walk into the cell phone store, and then do their SIM swap attack. And if your multi-factor authentication depends on SMS as a backup and recovery option, then what is the point of the multi-factor authentication? They can just waltz into the cell phone store, recover access to your device, and as far as you know, you've just lost your signal. It says SOS. But what's really happening is they are conducting a SIM swap attack and gaining access to your email, your bank, your organization, and your entire life. Or even worse, a SIM swap attack or social engineering carried out on your wife or your kids, and the control is only as strong as the secret that it depends on. And if that secret is made public, then the control really is doing nothing. So let me share some stories of where this actually played out. So 2023, 3 years ago to this day pretty much, a ransomware group called Scattered Spider, used information from LinkedIn to impersonate staff so convincingly that they were able to talk their way past the help desk at the MGM Resorts and Caesars in Las Vegas. Now, the same approach also hit the Marks & Spencer's retail chain in the UK, where I'm from originally. And this was only in 2025, so a year ago now. And the cost of this for MGM was around $100 million US. But for Marks & Spencer's, they expect that to be around $400 million US, which is insane. And there was no zero-day or clever exploit to get in the door. All they used was what was publicly available, open source intelligence, and a phone call. And it was this help desk assumption that was broken. Now, there were various studies as well. In 2025, I was reading one study where they found that ransomware attacks found physical threats against staff and even family members in 40% of cases. Criminals are increasingly using intimidation built on the public information that can be found, home addresses, family details, our daily routines, because it gives them leverage when they are demanding a payment. Rob Lee, for example, who's the founder of Dragos, his wife and son was implicated as part of this ransomware attack, where they found the phone number that was used between his son and I think it was the nanny. This is happening more and more. And that is the breach and the extortion and the deepfakes, and it's the failures that you are hearing out in the open, hence my new intro. And they all began with what was already public. OSINT, Reconnaissance. Now, one of the things I have done, and I have talked about this a few years ago, I believe it was, on a previous episode, was the OSINT Defense and Security Framework. And I have released an update. I've actually changed the license, so it's completely open source. You can check out all those details on the website, that's scisecure.com. But this framework really organizes everything that I've been describing into 5 areas. And I want to just cover this quickly because it is hundreds of pages. There's 150 controls. So if I went through the whole thing, we would be here all day. But the first one is digital footprint reduction. which is to shrink what's publicly knowable or known about the organisation and its people. And this is really the privacy half of this show, but just scaled up to a company. The second one is social engineering defence, which is getting our people, you and I, employees if you own a company, and processes ready to stand up when an attacker already knows the details. Now the third one is technology exposure management, which is the technical surface that any threat actor can find, or anyone in all, doesn't have to be a threat actor, just looking from the outside. So what can they find from your domains? Which services are you running? What code is on GitHub? But this obviously goes beyond that as well. The fourth one is executive exposure protection. And this is exactly addressing the increase in executives being targeted in ransomware, but other cyber threats as well. And then finally is this continuous monitoring and response. It's no good putting these things in place and then forgetting about it, because things get stale, things change. This is a continuous monitoring and response pillar that is watching this public information for new exposures and being able to act on it really quickly. So these are the 5 areas. So across these 5 areas, I've broken them up into 34 subcategories, and under them, a total of 150 individual controls. Now, this is not a framework designed to replace NIST or anything else, but it's a framework designed to map to NIST and other security frameworks as well, and to fill that confidence control gap that I mentioned. Because every one of those controls is tagged with the size of the organization it is meant for. Some may apply to a one-man band, maybe the guy that has a lawn maintenance company. Others would only make sense if you're a large enterprise organization with a dedicated security team. It is not one size fits all, but it's been designed that way. So you apply what fits to your own situation, not everything on the list. That would be crazy. So technically, this could work for you as a single person, or your household, a small business, or the large enterprise. So the framework is completely open. As I mentioned, it's published under a Creative Commons license, which in simple terms basically means anyone can use it. Anyone can adapt it. You can build on it. You can use it for your own commercial work if you like. The only thing I ask is that you credit it, and you credit me as the author. And it has really gone past just being this privacy thing that I've done for decades now to something that I've really put together as my own guide. Is how I approach things in security and privacy. And if it's useful to someone, then fantastic. That was the goal. So I want to leave you with something you can actually do. So here's some homework for you. If you are listening as an individual, before you buy any more privacy tools or take any extreme measures, do 2 things that a CISO would do first. Run Reconnaissance on yourself. Search for your own name. Look at the people search sites and see what a complete stranger could find out about you. Give yourself a budget, $10. I wouldn't pay for these people search sites unless you've really hit a brick wall. They probably would pay. Threat actors would pay $5, $10, $20, but it shouldn't take you too long. It might take less than an hour. But if your security questions do have things like your first pet's name, your date of birth, for example, then can you figure that out from your social media? Has someone said happy 20th, happy 50th, however old you are, on a particular day on your Instagram, Facebook, whatever social media you use? Because from that one happy birthday message, you can work out your exact date of birth. Now, we need to save this for future episodes, but I also want to very quickly say that security questions should not be easy to guess. They should be answers that are stored in your password manager somewhere. So my pet's name, or the first pet anyway, is probably some nonsense like the Galactic Lord of Alien Invasion from Plutonian Planet X. It is quite embarrassing if you're on the phone to technical support at a service company and they want to confirm a security question, but I also find this quite amusing as well. But these should be unique. And a note to security leaders out there, please don't do it. Don't rely on security questions. There should be no way to access someone's account based on a date of birth or the first street you lived on. I absolutely loathe this pattern, but this is the reality that we are being faced with. And if you are the person that's responsible for security in a small business or even a large organization, here is a single high leverage control that you can start with. Offer data broker removal to your team, the same way you would give them a password manager. In fact, if you're not doing that, give them the password manager as well. It should be voluntary. It doesn't have to force anyone, but you're giving them the security tools you expect them to use in the company, in their personal life as well. And why wouldn't you? Because you don't have this perimeter around the organization. The threat actor doesn't. They're looking at people from a personal standpoint as well as a way in to your organization. And I think this quietly closes off one small reconnaissance path for the exact people who are most likely to be impersonated. It's a small thing, but I think it has a real effect. Now, today's show has been a bit of a mixed bag, but I wanted to do some catching up. And I will say, it is great to be back and talking with you. Now, the ODSF is available to download on the website. You can download the PDF or the JSON format. Now, the JSON is really designed for a machine to read it, or if you have some need to have some programmatic access, you can use that. And as I say, it's freely available. Or the PDF is probably some good Sunday morning reading, although it's a little bit dry for a cover-to-cover read. But hey, whatever floats your boat. So with the return of the lockdown and for season 2, we will still be talking about privacy techniques. I've got lots on my list. I'm looking at it now. I want to talk about security cameras again. We're going to talk about mobile devices, especially with the Pixel 10 and probably newer devices that are coming out. I want to update you on things like Proton VPN and WireGuard, especially if you're using pfSense. I am overdue to write a blog post updating the pfSense guide to support WireGuard. So if you haven't figured it out by yourself, this is now something you would have to do with Proton, but it's much more reliable, it's faster, better performance, and the OpenVPN servers that they offer have pretty much all disappeared now. There may be a few still knocking about, but I wouldn't rely on that too much. And we'll be talking about why I use a VPN still to this day, despite those awful captures, but especially the worst ones are press and hold, and it fills up really slowly like a loading bar. I don't know why anyone would wish that on another human being, but this is where we are. And while we're talking about privacy, I also want to dive into some of the more nuanced situations. I even hinted to this earlier. Perhaps you have a contractor that's doing work on a kitchen, or if you're fortunate enough to have a swimming pool installed, whatever it may be. That's the type of thing that could result in an exposure. And if you are a high net worth individual, whether that be a celebrity or an executive or some other high net worth person, you've got to be careful because you may have done all the right things. You have a living trust, you have LLCs, you've structured your LLCs to keep you anonymous and your home address isn't in there. But the local county receives some planning permission or form and suddenly that's public. And if the contractor has filled that out, whether that be the person installing your bathroom or kitchen or whatever it may be, they may have just used your real name and then completely blown apart your privacy strategy. And the intention for the security side is to get some guests on the show. I'd like to interview some CISOs and also some people in the OSINT community as well. So we have lots to do. And I think the cadence of 1 or 2 a month is going to work pretty well. This allows me to travel, get back, recover and record a podcast. But I must admit, when I get back from my travels, I have been thinking more and more recently that I just want to record a podcast. So here I am, and we're back. We're back in business.